One Campus Spiritual and Religious Panel. So my name is Rob Butler. I serve as a coordinator in the Center for Student Activities. I primarily work with our spiritual and religious life at MSU, as well as in Maroon Camp. So we just want to say thank y'all so much for coming out tonight. So today we're going to have a conversation of many folks that represent all the Bulldog family is made up of. We're here to communicate, listen, hear, share, and just see different perspectives and positions on religion and spiritual life, whether we're believers or non-believers. We're just so excited to be here tonight and super glad to have my fellow colleagues here this evening. We're going to let them introduce themselves, so we'll go ahead and kick it off with Dr. Laurie Drake.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, I'm Dr. Laurie Drake. I am the Director of Continued Enrollment in the Center for Academic Excellence. I work with our suspended students on campus, so our students who are in academic distress. And I am also very honored to be the faculty advisor for Hillel, the Jewish Student Association on campus.
I'm Rizwan Farooqui, and I serve as Assistant Professor of the Building Construction Science Department with the College of Architecture. And my area of specialization is construction management. I work with construction safety. And I'm serving as the advisor for the Muslim Student Association for about a year and a half.
My name's Bisson. I've been teaching in the Department of Philosophy and Religion for about 22 years. I retired in January. As you can see, I'm happy. And I've taught a range of subjects within the field of religion, both Eastern and Western religions, but my particular focus has been on Christianity, and I've covered a range of subject areas in relation to that, from church history to biblical, theological studies, as well as the philosophy of religion. And so I'm glad to be here and joining with the panel to represent as best as I can the Christian position.
Okay, and I'm Bob Swanson. I am an instructor, hopefully instructor 2, as long as Dr. Keenan signs the promotion paperwork. I'm also lab coordinator in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and I teach the gen ed level courses in physics, physical science, survey 1 and 2, and teach descriptive astronomy as well. My background is actually meteorology, and in the summertime I have a side hustle as a singing weatherman. I tour the state playing at libraries, playing songs about science for kids. But I serve as the faculty sponsor for FAAMSU, which is the Free Thinkers, Atheists, and Agnostics at Mississippi State University. I've been faculty sponsor for that club since I arrived on campus in 2019. And more recently, there's a new club called Bridge City, which is a attempt to form a secular community, and a secular community that does a lot of the things that the religious community would do in the sense of offering volunteer opportunities for students. And that's a fairly new venture that we're just trying to get launched off the ground.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. So again, our goal this afternoon is simple: to replace assumptions with curiosity, to move from stereotypes to stories, and to create space where we can learn about one another in a way that builds respect, not division. We want to focus on our commonalities and shared experiences together here. So you don't have to agree with someone to understand them, but understanding changes the way that we see each other, and that matters. We hope to model this afternoon that we can come together in unity, even while disagreeing. We share disagreeing on beliefs or different aspects or positions. We share a space together for a brighter future. So as you listen, I invite you all to learn and lean in with curiosity and look for common threads of humanity that connect us all. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start off with one of our first questions for the evening or afternoon. You kind of forget what time it is when you're in here. It's so dark. So with that, I'd like to ask everyone on the panel just to share briefly this question of growing up. What shaped your understanding of your belief or worldview the most? Your family, community, personal experience, or something else? Anyone who would like to go first and then be more than welcome to. Dr. Rizwan, do you want to go with that first? Okay, awesome.
I'm sorry.
Perfect.
I'm a born Muslim, born in a Muslim family, and community also was Muslim community. I was brought up in Pakistan, which is my home country. So, being a Muslim actually means that I was, from a very early stage, I was exposed to the principles of the religion and was observing those, in action around me. In some perspective that might be a negative, that you don't get an opportunity to read the other perspective as well. But I take it this way that when I was growing up, a lot of things that I was doing made a lot of sense in terms of the internal compass that everybody has. For instance, Islam, the word itself, means peace, and belonging to a religion that actually bases itself on peace is something that you want to be connected with. Then whenever we as a ritual, when we meet anybody as a principle, we say these words, Arabic term, which says Assalamu alaikum. Now the meaning of that is that may peace and blessing of God Almighty be on you. Okay? So that's the Islamic way of greeting people. So from the very early stage, I was exposed to these principles. That's all about peace within yourself, looking at things from that perspective outside you, and then greeting people from that perspective as well. When I grew up further, I was more involved into reading the scriptures, understanding what different aspects mean. And one of the fundamental principles that came in front of me was that you cannot be a Muslim until you are a good human being. So you have to have a strong character, you have to have strong connectivity with the society, making sure that you're providing a positive impact on society. So if that is not happening, I cannot call myself a Muslim, right? So to be a true Muslim actually means that I have to have those fundamental principles of humanity established first. So not every, as I see it, not every Muslim can be called a Muslim until those fundamental principles are there. We may subscribe to that religion, but it has to be with respect to the principles. Another dimension which I looked at when I grew up, my personal experiences, was that I came across with this quotation from the scripture that says that whoever kills one person is as if he kills the entire humanity. And whoever saves one person is as if that person has saved the entire mankind, right? So these are the principles, actually, which I was seeing and I was believing in. And then, of course, one of the important aspects in Islam, in my religion, is that rituals are lesser important and they are not very useful until you are having a strong character and impact on society. So that's something that are in the fundamental principles and actions that I have seen over the years. Another important perspective which make me believe what I am and make me proud of it. Of course, all of us are proud of what we belong to, but make me proud of it is that the Quran that came, the holy book that came about 1400 years ago. That is the only book, and I can vouch for that has not been changed by even a single word over those 1400 years. And the reason is that it has been memorized by people, from generation to generation. So even now, we have about 2 billion people who are Muslims who subscribe to that faith, and millions of them have memorized Quran by heart, right? So not even a word, not even a section of that has been changed. And the relevance of the book is still there. So whatever you read, any old book, 1400 years old, when you read it today, for sure you'll find that there are discrepancies. There are things which are no longer relevant. But that is not the case with the Holy Quran that that I subscribe to. So that makes my belief more strong, looking being part of a religion that actually preaches humanity and preaches, in terms of character, that you have to be strong before you move ahead with the rituals. So this is what I have been brought up right, and I think that's the right perspective of looking at things from Islamic or Muslim perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Rizwan. Dr. Bisson or Bob or Dr. Drake, anybody want
I'm happy to
to share next? Just so growing up, what shaped your understanding or your belief or worldview the most? Was it your family? Was it your community, your personal experience, or something else?
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to think back further, to think whether I had any real understanding. But I was certainly indoctrinated in the sense that I was raised in a Roman Catholic home. And so certainly my family shaped that quite a bit, my mother in particular. And I was pretty deep into it in the sense that from third grade through high school, I was an Alden boy, so I was at Mass every week. While I'm going to a Jesuit university for an undergraduate. And so I had some, I don't know whether I had a great deep understanding, but I was certainly quite involved with it. And my college roommate wanted me to be a Catholic priest. I've gone to retreats at monasteries, and I even looked into the priesthood myself. And now, looking back, I want to essentially be converting through my 20s, and I would say by age 30, I would consider myself an apatheist in the sense that I had discarded any belief in the supernatural claims that religions have. But I didn't think too much. I essentially was just kind of like, if other people want to believe it, that's fine. And it wasn't until probably the last 10 years that I've become a little more, perhaps more of an activist, in the sense that I realized that beliefs inform actions, and actions impact not only an individual, but also quite often their community. And, of course, I'm a father, I've got 3 children, and for me, it's really important to teach my children and to teach my students things that I know to be true or likely, or that are likely true. And I've been to services like baptisms, and they kind of make me sad when I see a child essentially being claimed or labeled a particular with a religious belief. And quite often it's geographically determined. If it happens here in Mississippi, possibly a Baptist. And if you're up in Massachusetts, you're probably a Catholic. And if you're in an Islamic country, I don't know, is it Baptist in Islam? No, you don't need Baptist, it's okay. But a child will be labeled as a Muslim child. You're raised in a Muslim household. And yet that doesn't happen when it comes to like your career. Like you're not at age 7, you're not labeled a plumber, or you're going to be a nurse kind of thing. We wouldn't stand for that. We wouldn't stand for this label. Children are expected they're going to carry on the great plumbing heritage of our family. We do that with religion, and it's one that is unsettling. But for me, certainly that was the case. It was definitely a family-driven sort of belief system. Like I said, in retrospect, it was definitely an indoctrination on my part.
Yeah, I'll follow that because my path was similar to Bob's. It's that I was not raised Jewish. I was raised Episcopal and Catholic by my parents, and mainly, it's not like Bob's story, my exposure to religion came predominantly from my mother. So my journey in religion was a little bit different in that I became a Jew by choice in my later adulthood. After really falling away from Christianity and feeling like I'd always grown up having these questions and feeling like I couldn't ask them because asking questions, having questions, doubts, these things were very taboo in my household. So when I found Judaism, I describe it as getting this sense of peace and this sense of being at home and this place where I needed to be. I felt very robotic in the other stand, kneel, pray this, do that at these very, very specific times. And so I always felt like I was going through the motions, that it didn't make sense to me. And then when I found Judaism, I had been searching and searching and searching for a religious identity that I felt like I needed. I felt like made sense to me, represented what I believed, what I thought. And I had just had surgery, and my husband brings me this book, and I had just taken, you've done it, 23andMe, and found out that my mother's father, who we never knew, was an Ashkenazi Jew. And we had no idea about this, and I actually, that popped up in my 23andMe. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And my husband brought me a book about Judaism. He said, why don't you read this? It was called, it was by Anita Diamond. It was Choosing a Jewish Life. And within 5 pages, I was like, something clicked. So this makes sense to me. This feels like me. This feels like where I'm supposed to be. And within a month, I read 12 books about Judaism. At the same time doing a PhD, which is not a wise use of my time. I'm supposed to be reading other things. But I read these books. I started practicing. The first time I did a Shabbat, where I held Shabbat, and I lit the candles in my home, and I made the challah, it felt like I had been doing it my entire life. It felt like this is where I was supposed to be. This is what Adonai was directing me to. So I didn't have the religious experience with Judaism as a child. It wasn't until much later in my adulthood. But now, in the Jewish community, I attend B'nai Israel in Columbus, and it immediately felt like home. It immediately felt like this is where I was supposed to be. These ideas of, much like what Swan mentioned, peace and saving a life rather than taking a life. These were fundamental to my core beliefs. And one of the most powerful prayers for me in Judaism that really speaks, and I say it over and over a lot of times to kind of comfort myself when I'm stressed, or just when I'm putting my children to bed, we say the Shema. And it reminds us that we have this common belief, that we have this pursuing identity. So for me, it was much more of an adult experience in transition than it was as a child.
Thank you. Dr. Bisson.
Okay, for me, I grew up in a largely non-Christian environment. Neither of my parents were in any way committed to Christianity. They may have had some notions of there being a God, but that never formed into any particular religious expression. My father sent me to the local Anglican church when I was about 5 years old, so I could get some morality into me. Not that I was an outrageous child or anything like that, but he thought, it would facilitate his work in trying to develop my character as a young child. And I don't know how much I absorbed that particular point. I went along with what he directed me to do until one Sunday when I went and it was only girls there. I was 5 years old. And that was it for me. I wasn't going again. So then there was a hiatus. I got involved with a young people's group. It was run by the Methodist Church, equivalent to the Scouts, but with a Christian sort of connotation to it. And they sought to try and inform me about Christianity and the idea of the gospel and so on. But it was like water off a duck's back. Nothing sunk in. Because my whole worldview, framed by my father and my friends, was really you have to look after yourself and you need to become financially secure, and that's what life's all about. So anything outside of that just didn't register at all. Years go by, I leave that particular group, go to university, and there's a group of evangelical Christians calling upon people in their halls of residence. And so I engaged them in conversation, and we covered a variety of topics, and was invited by them to study the Bible. Well, in all this time, I'd not really read the Bible. It had been read to me in school in the UK, There was a compulsory worship service every single day. We said the Lord's Prayer from age 5 to 18 every day. We sang hymns every day. But that was just what we did. It was nothing that penetrated my life. But I thought, well, I'll go ahead and I'll study the scriptures so that I can, have a better and stronger arguments against Christians. So I enjoyed arguing. And so I did. I went along to studies and I grew a little bit in my understanding. I was just so far gone that my mind just could not absorb what was so alien and in many ways irrelevant to me. Until one day I decided I would carry on studying this Bible so that I could have my arguments in line with the Christians. Because I thought, well, only as fair is fair. If I'm going to argue with them, I need to know their primary text. So I was reading John's Gospel, and I was reading it in the King James. Now, a lot of people over here think that everyone in Britain reads the King James. We don't. We don't understand it. But I was there reading it in the King James, and got to John chapter 3, where Jesus Christ was engaging Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was a Pharisee, he was well educated, and he was curious about Jesus Christ as to whether he was the Messiah or not. And in that engagement of Jesus Christ with Nicodemus, it seemed like Christ was trying to get across something really significant to Nicodemus, which Nicodemus, as intelligent as he was, just didn't seem to get. And really, he should have gotten it, but he didn't. And it was about being born again, about being washed in order to come into the kingdom of heaven. You can only come in if you're holy. And yet Nicodemus didn't get it at all. Now, without going into all the details of the text, the thing that struck me, and this may sound astounding to you, but for the first time in my life, seeing the interaction between Jesus Christ and Nicodemus, I thought, maybe Jesus Christ was a real person. There are a few people who would really want to argue too much about that, but it serves to illustrate how far gone my mind was from, in any way, looking for religion or Christianity. I was okay with my life. I wasn't sort of falling apart internally or externally. And if anything, I was being driven by my own pride to want to engage others. One of the students, a graduate in psychology actually, did a number of intensive studies with me where he slowly, gradually built up my understanding of what Christianity was about. So we looked at the doctrine of man, what is humanity? We looked at the doctrine of Christ, who is the Christ, the doctrine of God, the doctrine of redemption, the doctrine of salvation. So, I studied biology, by the way, at university. As all these different sort of elements came into place, I began to formulate, finally, an understanding of who God is, what Jesus Christ has accomplished, what the nature of salvation is, and so on. And I came to the point where I was absolutely intellectually persuaded that this was true. Now, I wasn't wanting it to be true. It was that I was persuaded that there is a clear, cohesive, coherent argument being presented by this biblical material. It made sense to me. And it made sense because it corresponded to the reality that I understood. That is, the reality of the world in which we live, the reality of my own humanity, the reality of social order, whatever dimension you want to take, it made sense. And here is a God who appears personal, moral, good, and merciful, and gracious. And none of this, seemed fanciful to me, but it seemed rationally, clearly, persuasively presented with a testimony of millennium. And so I came to the point where I thought, I believe all this to be true, but I don't believe it in my heart. What about it? And I thought, well, great, I'm going to hell. But I can't do anything about it, because if I'm to embrace Christ as my God, my Lord, then I've got to mean it. Otherwise, it's meaningless. You can't say that you love someone if you don't love that person. Otherwise, it's vacuous. And so I found myself in a dilemma. What do I do? I'm persuaded, absolutely persuaded, rationally persuaded, that this is true, and that my position is precarious. So I prayed. I said, God, help me. I can't change my heart. I can't drive up an affection when there isn't one there, or a commitment when I don't feel like a commitment. So I did. I prayed, and a couple of weeks went by. I went to church with someone, and that was of some help. But once again, it was the graduate student who'd spent so many painful hours with me, answering all my questions and so on, who had yet another conversation with me. And I came finally to the point, because he was challenging me, what are you holding back on? And whatever obstacles I had, consciously or unconsciously, were unearthed. And I realized then that the barriers had been removed, the door was open, so to speak. And at that point, I had a consciousness, without any pressure, that if I didn't make a decision then, when the clarity was there in my mind, I would lose it. Now, I'm stressing that wasn't any emotional manipulation. The student who was with me said, "Do you want to pray together?" I said, "No, I'll be on my own." So he left, and I was there on my own in the room. And sometimes life is like that. There are moments where if one responds, everything is fine to facilitate that response. But if you delay, it goes. It's a peculiar thing because I'm rationally persuaded, and yet I knew it also involved the affection of my heart. And in as much as I couldn't cause an affection to arise there was an arousing affection, and I could easily suppress it, and then it'd be gone. So I did. I submitted myself to God, embraced Him, committed myself to faithfully following Him, and living according to the light of His Word. And I thought bells would ring. Nothing happened. The following day, my moral commitment to pursuing God in holiness was challenged. But in the grace of God, I was strengthened to not fall into a moral pit. And in many ways, from that point, it has been a reality of divine grace, enabling the development of a character that holds faithfully to the truth of the faith. So just as has already been spoken, it's not a matter of following a set of beliefs. It's not a matter of a ritualistic outlook. It's not a matter of an intellectual, coherent ideology or philosophy, but a reality of a relation that is genuine and that has an intellectual, cogent, emotional, whole body and soul engagement. And so, for me, that was my route. And fascinatingly enough, in reflection, it wasn't one that I was looking for. But in reflection back, seeing the reality of God's grace in the weakness of my own persona, strengthening it to remain faithful to Him.
Thank you, Dr. Bisson. So the next question will be open for everyone to answer, whoever would like to answer. What is something about your worldview or religion that brings you comfort, grounding, or clarity in life? Laura, I know you already talked a little bit about a Shabbat meal and saying the Shema. If there's anything else, or if anyone else would like to share something about your worldview or religion that brings comfort, grounding, like in the midst of life. And I thought that was amazing, like just to be able to like put yourself in that headspace. So, anyone else?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one. I wrote some little notes to myself. Atheism, which I'm just going to call skepticism. That's atheism is just the answer to one question: why do you believe God exists? I'm not convinced. I'm skeptical about almost everything. So skepticism, to me, it means that I don't need to pretend to believe something that I have no way of knowing whether it is true or not. But I'm not just a skeptic. I also like to think of myself as a humanist. And humanism gives me perspective. One of my thought heroes is a guy named Robert J. Ingersoll. If you're not familiar with him, he was a 19th century orator, quite famous in his day. A lot of folks knew who Robert J. Ingersoll was. He was known as the great agnostic. And gave all kinds of talks in the 19th century. But one of his quotes, it's kind of a mantra for me. He said, happiness is the only good. The place to be happy is here. The time to be happy is now. The way to be happy is to make others so. And that, to me, gives me a lot of comfort and meaning.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share on that?
Okay, I'll pick up on what Rizwan and Laura have said with regard to shalom, peace, or shalom. It's the reality of coming to a wholeness, but not a wholeness merely in relation to myself, but in relation to God Himself and in relation to others. I think one of the things that we can sometimes struggle with, especially in these days, is trying to find inner peace, trying to find inner contentment. But the answer lies within the relations that we have. The relationships that we have can either bring the greatest of comfort and peace or the greatest of pain. Yet nevertheless, we don't give up on relationships, except for a few who perhaps go into isolation. And for me, one of the comforts is being in a relation to God whereby I see Him not as someone who simply facilitates my life, but someone who gives me purpose in the fulfillment of His purposes in this world. And that takes the focus away from myself and brings it upon Him, but not simply settled upon Him to the degree that I'm immobilized from any interactions with others. It's summed up in the Jewish scriptures all too well, and picked up in the Christian scriptures, and picked up in Islam as well. Given the Jewish expression, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And the capacity to love oneself doesn't arise from simply within, or even just someone saying, well, you're lovely. It requires a profound engagement with the reality and depth of love. And the degree to which we are able to love others comes through the experience of a depth of love in our own lives. And the world in which we live is filled full of hatred, bitterness, gives rise to anger, resentment, depression, and so on and so forth. And the ability to live in relation to a God who has tangibly expressed the depth of love brings to a psychological state an ability to evaluate my loveliness, not by inward self-reflection of what someone else says, but by the value that God has placed upon my life. Furthermore, the forgiveness of sin and the guilt and shame that can arise in sin is hard to deal with. But the reality of knowing that positions me to be able to forgive others, and not to live with a grudge or a resentment, but rather to be able to deal effectively, though it takes perseverance, with those issues that so often plague us. And then finally, in reality of all of that, there is the truth of the sovereignty of God. And this spans Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. He is absolutely sovereign. He works all things together for the good of those who love Him. And this reality of divine sovereignty doesn't alleviate us of our responsibility. It actually frees us to be responsible to live righteously before God and before one another. So that's how my worldview is informed.
I would just like to add my perspective to it. One of the things that bring grounding or clarity to me is the concept in Islam that all human beings, no matter what creed, no matter what group they belong to, no matter what color they are all equal. And the better are only those who are following the path of righteousness and piety. Right? So the distinction only comes with respect to the actions and not with respect to the background or where you belong to. So that actually gives me a lot of comfort, a lot of grounding in terms of meeting people, understanding their points of views, trying to explain my point of view, and then debating in a positive sense how we can find the commonalities and look at things from a collective perspective. Worship in my religion, and I think that might be true for others as well, does not mean, as I said, the rituals. Worship actually means anything that you do with a good intention. For example, helping somebody is worship in Islam. It's not just that it's a good thing that you're doing. It's basically counted as a part of worship that we're doing. And that's the principle behind my religion. So, for example, if I'm teaching my kid something which is useful for him in life, I'm earning money for my family to give them a comfortable living, and I'm doing it in the right sense, it's all part of worship. Right? So that actually gives me a lot of comfort, because I don't have to just look at completing my prayers or doing things which are the rituals. I need to live every instant of my life from that perspective, right? I need to look at what am I doing right now? What am I doing with my family? What am I doing with my colleagues? Is there something that they don't like about me, right? Is there something that I can help them with? So it's all part of that equation that makes it, so livable and so enjoyable, every moment of your life.
So Judaism has the teaching of tikkun olam, which is to repair the world. And you do this from these actions, little mitzvah, excuse me. And as Rizwan mentioned, these can be things from giving to charity. These can be things from going, like we're doing at our synagogue right now, is we're painting the bathrooms. It's not a big thing. It's not a religious, we're not they're saying the prayers while we're doing it. We're singing and dancing, but it is a form of worship because we're giving back. And when I sit and I'm teaching my children, they're both getting ready for their bar and bat mitzvahs. When we're going through the prayers, when they're reciting, when they're reading scripture, I feel at my closest with my religious beliefs in those moments, because I see my children experiencing something and understanding something and being excited about it. So that moment of teaching is a sense of worship. And every step that I take, and I falter because, we're human, I try to think about, am I bringing something that betters this world? Am I making this world a better place, shining a light on something? Or am I producing something that's negative? Am I taking away something from that? And ultimately, daily, how I worship and how I practice that focus, and what shapes my worldview is, I am meant to bring good. I am meant to bring light, to help repair, to have this community, to have these conversations, to have these dialogues, and show that there is this single thread that connects all of us, and it's just general humanity, and wanting these good things for others, and trying to bring that to the table.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. Speaking of community, can each of y'all share a little bit about just like nuggets of community here in Starkville, in Mississippi State, that you're a part of, that you're connected with, that helps you stay grounded and rooted based out of your religious beliefs? So like what that has experienced like. For students, like our goal is to help students find their community. If they were looking for their community, or this is going off script. We're trying at least. I used to work at a radio station. It's different with a room full of people versus just a microphone. So with that, like community. Well, I know each of us have different places of worship, or not having a place of worship, but still have fellowship and community. What factor would you say that plays in your religious or non-religious beliefs, the aspect of community? Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I'm happy that's one thing I'm trying to do. Is part of the reason why it's important for me to become faculty sponsor for a secular group on campus is that, shucks, if you're a believing freshman and you show up in Starkville, Mississippi, on the campus of Mississippi State, there's a zillion places for you to plug in. Baptist Student Union, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Wesley Foundation, and we all need community, and that's such an easy move for a student to make. And for a student who's not necessarily a believer to come on campus, where do they go? Where do they find their crowd? And I was what my whole intention is to create that space for students who don't have religious belief, but we're not closed off. Quite often we have Christian students who come and attend our meetings, and I think that's wonderful. We encourage anybody who's interested in talking about how religion impacts society, impacts politics, and sometimes we just have students who they've been raised to believe a certain thing for 18 years, and they're starting to tell them last a little bit. And man, I wish I'd had that space when I went to a Catholic, Jesuit Catholic university. Everybody was Catholic. And I never thought to even ask any questions. And I often wonder if I had been transported back, if there had been a secular group on campus that I had learned about. I don't know if I would have attended. I hope that I would have. I think it would have helped me ask the questions I should have asked me at that time, and perhaps thinking back, could have shaved off 10 years of my life. I would have gotten clear. And so for me, it's really important to have that space, that opportunity, and that community. And I think that a lot of folks go to church for the community aspect and volunteer opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And so ideally, that's why the Bridge City is kind of new club that I'm working on and trying to develop. Could there be a secular community that does the stuff, all the good stuff that churches do, and the things that keep people in churches, without all the other stuff, without the theology part of it? That's kind of part of my mission.
Anyone else? Just the role of community for you from your religious background? Anybody, Krish?
With respect to the Muslim community, we have an Islamic center in Stockville. We don't have a large community here, small town. But the good thing, of course, with every community perspective is that if there's a center, there's a lot of activities happening around that center. So every Friday, we have a major prayer that happens in the afternoon, and everybody, I see it's almost full at that point in time. Everybody comes in, say the prayers, and they have a wonderful opportunity to meet each other actually, and see if there are any issues. And a lot of students, for example, who come in are supported from that platform. Like, for example, if they need a new car or a place to stay or something in their household. So all of those things are led by the community. The senior people in the community are always welcoming, and we even have sessions. For example, there was a month that completed a few days back. We call it the fasting month, Ramadan. So in that Ramadan month, every day there was dinner that was served by the community, and everybody, all Muslims of course are welcome, but at times there were non-Muslims coming in. They wanted to observe, they wanted to see that, okay, how Muslims are doing this, activities are being done. So we welcome, of course, all the people, not with any kind of compulsion, just come over, see what we are doing. You may have some questions that you want to ask. So those kind of activities we are always doing. So for the whole month, 30 days, we had those activities running every day. And then after the month of Ramadan fasting, we have something like Easter, we call it Eid. It's a kind of gathering where we pray to God that, okay, He allowed us to actually have those 30 days of fasting, and we were able to pass through that. And with that blessing, we pray to Him, and we enjoy with our families. So there's fun-filled activities for kids, for families, so all of those kind of things. So although it's a small community here, but I see a lot of connectivity. And the best thing about, as I was saying about Islam, is that no matter where you're coming from, what kind of background you have, whether you're a rich person or a poor person, whether you have good clothes or not enough on your body, it doesn't matter. But as soon as you are coming to the center, now you are part of that community, and all of your problems are to be taken up by the people around who are able to help you in any way they can. So that kind of a spirit, I think, is as I was saying, was the main spirit behind being part of this religion. It's all about bonding, connectivity, and knowing people, their issues, and trying to resolve their issues. And at times, we are not only serving the Muslim community. We are, for example, we had a good deposit of money. People were giving charity in Ramadan, so we were able to support non-Muslim community based on those collections as well. So this is how we are trying to serve the purpose of looking at humanity at large, and of course whoever are coming and interacting, they have the first chance, but then we spread out and try to connect with other people who are in need or any kind of support. So that's how we try to fit.
For Christianity, all of humanity needs community. It's rare for people to want to live alone, and it's part of our well-being. Our psychological, our emotional, our bodily well-being. We need to be in an affirming community, and it's healthy to be so because it delivers us from an introspection and a self-absorption that distorts reality, and enables us to engage with others that will challenge our thinking and our living in hopefully positive ways that promotes right and good living. With respect to Christianity, founded upon Judaism, community is indispensable. God created the community, created Adam and Eve, gave them children. It starts a nation off with Abraham, gives him many descendants, and chooses to bless the nations of the world through him. And his very purpose in blessing Abraham was that he would bless the nations, the Goyim, all the peoples through him, so that the reality of God as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the reality of God in his love and in his enrichment of human existence, in relation to him, in relation to one another, necessitates community. Love your neighbour as yourself requires a community. One of the distinctive facets with regards to Christianity is that it started off as a community of caring in practical ways for one another. It describes that in the book of Acts, chapter 2. But it becomes more identified in terms of a particular purpose, not humanitarian consideration merely, but rather the growing of community in character, in stature, in reflection of who Christ is and who God is and what God has done. And this boils back down to the reality of credibility. It's not just simply establishing a caring community or a good works community, but establishing a community that in its very relations between the members of that community, across the diversity of those members and the temperaments and circumstances and such like of those members and the social capacity of the members, across all those dimensions, to show a unity founded upon a unity with God and a unity, therefore, with one another. The expression of a divine, real love in the way in which people genuinely, from the heart, love and have an affection for one another, thereby destroying the segmentation of society that so readily happens wherever humans come together. So that the community itself manifests the stature of God in the very characteristics of who this God is and the worthiness of God. And as has already been pointed out, worship is not a punctuated activity of a person's life happening on just a certain day, but it's the totality of life expressing the worthiness of God. And the greatest expression of that happens when the people of God come together in unity in the honor and worship of God in the way in which they relate to one another, which then shapes their character, that they might work well with those who are outside that community, responding to them righteously with humility and grace and service as opportunity arises.
So the community that I have the pleasure to be a part of has really, we've spoken a lot about what the community does outwardly, but the community is just as important, I think, to us as individuals. And I know that my community, when I'm feeling my lowest, I know that if I call anyone of my friends from the temple, or if I speak to any of my Hillel students, my mood is immediately elevated. It gives a great place to go and be heard and be seen and to discuss the questions that religious, political, community-wide, the problems that we're seeing in a way that we can communicate effectively. So for us, community, Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. So to convert to Judaism it's a mountain in itself. So when I found my community and when I joined B'nai Israel, the welcome that I received and the assurance that please come in, learn more, ask questions, participate if you want to. I've really tried to emulate that in our community building with Hillel and then with our synagogue in Columbus. And one of the most important things that we like to do is welcome others to experience. We have Shabbat on campus in April where we have the ISGL leadership come and lead us in a Shabbat service on a Friday night. We're getting ready to have our Passover service, our Passover Seder on April 1st at B'nai Israel. And we frequently have groups from other religious faiths and backgrounds come and experience our Shabbat services with us or our Seders. And we don't look at them as oh, well, you're not Jewish, should you participate? We look at them as saying, okay, have this experience with us. Let us explain to you why this matters to us, why we perform this. We'd be happy to share this with you, and we'd love it for you to participate and learn and enjoy. And reaching out to those, building the community on campus. We have such a small group of students here at Mississippi State that practice Judaism, but they are the most welcoming bunch of students, and just the community they've built here on campus. We're just seeing them grow, and what they're doing, I think, to answer tough questions that are being posed, I think is really just, it's inspiring to me as their advisor.
I know, I can just attest to the hospitality because myself and another member of our secular student group went to the Shabbat service back at the beginning of this fall semester. And the food was good, and the hospitality was nice as well.
We do food well.
We did Hail Steak Holidays
Yes.
when we had the menorah lit, and I got some challah bread, and it was phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I also just love food, so as we all can relate, we can all come together in a commonality of food.
I have no problem baking challah for anybody who wants it.
Sign me up. But, no, thank you for sure. Thank you, Laura. And also just the hospitality amongst all of our speakers today. Just us getting to be together. We were on a phone call for an extended time and have gotten to meet with each other, and it's just been wonderful to see. There's a reason why we're called the People's University. There's a reason where we can all come together and share, and we had many laughs as we were talking. We've been very serious during these conversations, as should be, every right to be. One other question we have, I know we're running late on time, so real brief nuggets on this one. One question we'd like to ask is, how does your belief or worldview shape your everyday life in ways that people may not notice? That's it. Got it.
Okay, so we skipped that. We skipped the other one here. All right.
We're just having to jump around.
That's fine. Let's see. Yeah, so the question is, how does your belief in worldview shape your everyday life in ways that people might not notice? As an atheist, as far as I can tell, this is my one and only shot. It's the only life that I'm guaranteed to have. You know, it's not a practice run, it's not a place to wipe my feet. And that's one perspective. And I teach astronomy. And I'm also old. And I'm going to be dead soon. I tell that to my students, I tell that to my children. Because from an astronomical perspective, a human lifespan is tiny, tiny, tiny. And this viewpoint gives urgency to my life. It makes every relationship far more significant to me. And you know, the people that I love and that I care about, I better make sure that they know that now. And people who don't necessarily like the fact that I'm not a believer of any particular God, I'm not going to let them steal my joy. I don't have time for that. I don't have the time or energy. If they don't like it, that's their problem. One thing that happened just this past week was on Sunday. We had a Sunday session. Like I said, I'm involved in this organization called Bridge City. And there's a guy named Durante Lamar, who's a former preacher, and actually came to campus back in October. And I've met Durante only a couple of times. And it just so happened that Durante's son, he's got a senior in high school, he's going to be going to college next year. His son got an internship with my department, Mississippi State Physics Department. And so he was bringing his son up to start his internship on Sunday. And we also do a thing called Sunday Sessions, the streamed secular community that Durante is essentially, as a former preacher, he kind of leads it. And so he's from Dothan, Alabama, but he had to take his kid up here to Starkville, so we want live streaming the normal Sunday session. He does from his home in Dothan. We did it from on campus here. And as we're getting set up, I happened to mention to Destin, I called him his son Destin, I said, so what dorm are you staying at? And he said, actually, I need to talk to Dr. Kreider about that. Like, it hadn't been set up. Like, this student came, senior in high school, had exchanged emails with the physics department, and somewhere things, something didn't get communicated. This kid drove, 5 hours, and he's had a place to stay. And I thought, gosh, I'm a father, right? Why would you do that moment? And so I said, well, I think that I've got a couple of options. My son's now a freshman here at Mississippi State, so his room is open in my house. Durante's son, Destin, you can stay with us. Or it turns out my son lives in Hull Hall, never got a roommate, so he's got a bed free. And that's the way we worked it out this week. We stayed, he arrived on Sunday, and today was his last day of his internship. Durante, I was hoping might actually be here, but I think they'd probably head back to Dothan. But I wonder if Durante, 15 years ago when he was still a preacher, if this had happened, he would have seen it as a sign from God. God somehow provided. Because they arrived for this internship and things weren't set up, but all of a sudden some joker says, hey, you can stay with my son. But now, of course, he just knows that I'm a dad just like him. And I would hope that if my child was in that sort of situation and someone else had that ability to take care of it, they would. And so that's an everyday kind of thing that it's just humanity. You don't need to actually, hold a belief in any particular God to be a good person. And I like to think that's what I model for my kids and for my students and my members of my group. I like to think that they think that I'm a good person.
Well, you talk about the realization that life is short and that really we should seize the day and live to the fullest extent that we can each day and enjoy the people, not take them for granted and such. And I think that's a really important aspect of living that's intrinsic to our humanity, which in Christianity may be lost to many, simply because they're looking for the escape. That there's going to be a brighter future ahead. But the truth of the matter is that Christianity and Judaism and Islam are existential in as much as the moment matters. How I think, how I speak, how I act in the moment is really important. And it is bound up with the very worship of God in terms of how I respond to circumstances. And I think that sense of urgency in a framework where people have an escapist mentality is lost, but it's part of our humanity. And I think it's not just simply driven by an atheistic perspective, but rather by a sober reality of what life is about. And there is a work to do in terms of our engagement with others. I think when we see that happening, whether a person be an atheist or a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian, we can resonate with that because that communicates to us something of our significance as human beings. That's how human beings ought to be. Cain, said, am I my brother's keeper? At the moment he says that, he denies his humanity. He was to be his brother's keeper in some way or another. And we are to be one another's keepers. So I think you shine a light by expressing your experience in regard to living on an area that I think in some ways Christianity has lost sight of. Now, I don't mean to say that Christianity is separated from the world, but I just wonder how much of an urgency there is to live to the fullest degree for the sake of, in our case, God himself, and for the sake of the representation of him in doing the kindness, like you sought to do, to others in representation of the kindness of our God.
From my perspective or Islam's perspective, the things that I do that people do not really notice from that perspective. As I said, the fundamental principles behind Islam is meeting people, greeting people, making sure that I'm contributing to the society in a positive manner. So, for example, when I'm meeting somebody with a smile on my face, that seems to be a good gesture from that other person's perspective. But to me, it's a worship that I'm doing. Right? That's the sense that religion brings, actually, from my perspective. Belonging to that religion is giving me much more satisfaction if I was only doing it to just for the other person to believe that I am doing the right thing. So it's much more than that. I'm doing it because this is the right thing, what God has instructed me to do. So Islam actually provides me a complete way of life. It tells me what to do and what not to do, what I can eat, how I should eat it, how I should be meeting with people, how I should be training my kids, what I should be training my kids. So every walk of life, you name it. Even when I'm cutting my nails, I'm just giving an example to tell you what it means actually. When I'm cutting my nails, I have to do a particular order because that has been instructed that this is how you should be doing it. So from a prescriptive perspective, everything has been set. The rules have been set by as we believe, the Creator has set the rules. This is how you should spend your life. So whatever I'm doing most of the time, people may be thinking that this is because of my product, this is because of how I am as a person, but it's more because how I am connected to my religion. So most of those things, which seems very common and acceptable, are actually coming from the background is coming from the religious perspective that I carry.
Absolutely. I think Judaism, in much the same way, certainly influences the food that I eat, the prayers that I say, the walk that I do. One of the things that I think people wouldn't notice is how I treat everybody is not based on their identity. It's not based on their religion, their gender, their political stance. How I treat people is based on how Judaism instructs us to treat others. And this acceptance and this love, there's this really great example, Anita Diamond talks about it in one of her books, and she says that, every single Jew is believed to have been at Mount Sinai. Every soul of a Jewish person who lived, who hasn't lived, who's going to live, was supposed to be at Mount Sinai. But the world is not supposed to be all Jewish. We're not all supposed to be Jews. It's this group. And that's one of the reasons why we don't proselytize. But how I try to live my life is to show that I am just as accepting of your personal stance as I can, as I should be. Should be. And I try to extend that love. And some people may not associate that clearly with Judaism, but for me, that's where it comes from. It's coming from those teachings to show love, to show respect, to show honor, and to do as much good as I can, and that's how I try to approach it.
Well, thank you all so much. Now, I know we're running a little bit later on time, so if there's anything else anyone would like to share, anything they would like to share with everybody, just something that may not have been covered, very brief.
I'll plug my group. I always plug FAAMSU. We meet in Swan 105 on Thursday. We're not having a meeting tonight, though, are we? Oh, we are? Okay, all right. So I will not be at a meeting tonight, but the rest of the crew will be at Swan 105. We do have a speaker coming up on April 9th, if anybody's interested. We have a sociologist from Ole Miss she wrote a book called Whispers in the Pews. It's evangelical uniformity in a divided America. And she actually embedded herself as a sociologist in a church in the Oxford, Mississippi area for several years. And even though she's not a believer, she went to the small groups and she went to the church, she did the volunteer thing, and she wound up writing this book. So she's going to be coming and speaking about her book on April 9th. But between now and then, of course, we have Easter, right? So if anybody's interested, I wrote a blog a number of years ago for a website called streetepistemology.com. It's one of my hobbies. It's called Street Epistemology, where I like to have conversations about people about why they believe what they believe. Well, it got old on that website, so they knocked it off, and I wound up republishing it. It's on my own personal website, so if you're interested in learning about my children's music career, I've got a website called Swanson.com, and if you go to the blog, it's several entries. I published it back, I think, last spring. I wrote a blog called I'm Giving Up Certainty for Lent. Because I did. I gave up certainty for Lent. In fact, I give up certainty every day. I think that it's really important to, in fact, on my guitar, I say this machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again. And I'm always encouraging my students to kind of approach life this way. Anytime you think you're certain about something, it's probably a good time to start asking yourself some questions. And I do, in that blog, spoiler alert, I know in a couple of weeks when it's Easter, I'm going to see, as I'm driving around town, I'm going to see He is risen on every church sign. And for every pulpit, I'm going to hear He is risen. Hallelujah. Right? A confidence that sounds to me like about 100%. Right? These people could not be mistaken. And I would put myself much, much lower on that confidence scale. And I'm always open to having that conversation about, well, how did you get to that point? Is that 100% really an accurate place to put yourself? If I were to drive around Starkville in 2 weeks, looking out, and see 60% chance He has risen, I feel more comfortable out of the community. Because I think that would be a kind of more accurate place to put your confidence based on the quantity and quality of evidence. So anyway, if you want to read that blog post, I'm Giving Up Certainty for Lent. That's on my Swanson.com website.
Bob, I wish I was a blogger, but I'm not. So you've inspired me. Mine is God is absolutely certain, 100%. And it's resting on the certainty of God Himself, of who He is, of what He has accomplished, what He is accomplishing, gives a stability to my life. Yeah, I'm uncertain. I'm unpredictable. Circumstances in which I live are uncertain and unpredictable to a large degree, but God is. The whole heart of the gospel is not simply a matter that God has a place for me and He's forgiven me my sins, but rather the atonement for sin is to the end of reconciliation, to behold the God who is and always is, and who in His unchangeability is a constant that assures the reaction and action that He has towards those who look to Him. So the gospel is a matter of reconciliation, so that we behold the God who is and absolutely certain, not because I have drawn myself up into that position, but because he has revealed himself with a degree of clarity as to bring that degree of certainty. Thank you.
We would love, we're kind of filled up with spots this spring, but in the fall, if you'd be interested in coming and speaking to our FAAMSU group, that's,
We'll be glad to.
Dr. Drake is kind enough
Very
to.
welcoming group.
Yeah, so, I would love to continue that conversation.
We talked for an hour about roller coasters afterwards. Yeah.
I would just like to add a couple of things. Some of the misconceptions that people may have, about Islam. I think one of the misconceptions, which I often find, is that Islam maybe is a backward religion, not too modern, right? And maybe a very new religion, that's, for example, Christianity has been there for a long time, Judaism has been there for a long time. So, as we believe in Jesus Christ, we believe in Moses, we believe in a lot of messengers coming from God. And we believe that Christ was a savior that was sent on earth. And we also believe that Muhammad, peace be upon him, the last messenger, is the last messenger. So God has sent more than 120,000 prophets on earth in different times. This is what we believe. So some may have a misconception that Islam is something that preaches another prophet, who is different and not connected to the previous religion. So basically, Islam was there since time. The very first person, Adam, on earth, from that perspective, was a God's messenger, and that thing has moved on from years to years, and different prophets have come over the years. The other thing is, which I would like to specify as the strength of my religion, is the scientific modern facts that Islam talks about. In Quran, and I can mention a lot of things, there have been many descriptions about which only modern science has been able to establish. For example, Quran talks about that the sun and the moon, they all rotate in their orbits. And it's only recently that science has found that sun is also a rotating object. It's not static. So this has been there in the Quran 1400 years back. Quran talks about the Big Bang in the perspective that the earth and the heavens were all joined, connected initially. Then there was a Big Bang and they got separated. So that's also given in the Quran. Similarly, the Quran mentions about deep seas and waves inside the seas. And it also talks about that when two seas are meeting together, they still have a barrier and one doesn't mix with the other. And you can see that, for example, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, there's a distinct boundary that segregates the seas together, separated them from mixing from each other. So that's a lot of those things. It talks about black holes. It talks about how the human embryo is developed inside the womb of a woman, right? So all of those things which modern science has recently found, have been there in Islam. Iron, for example, as a material, we have only recently found that it is not something that belongs to earth. And Quran says that we have sent iron to the earth. So it actually came in from the meteorites that hit the earth a long time back, and that was the source of iron. And today modern science agrees to that. So, from that perspective, I would like to, encourage all of you when you're here, and of course it's, another perspective that you're looking at. It's extremely important for all of us to know each other, what we believe, what kind of, belongings we have, because harmony can only come when we are able to understand each other. There may be a lot of misconceptions, in my mind, for example, about Christianity, about other religions, for example, about not being, subscribing to any religion. But I think these kind of sessions, these kind of, talks are extremely important to, and should be done on a larger scale as well, where people can have an opportunity to even ask questions to see that, how they relate it to their own beliefs or non-beliefs, and what are the myths and what are the realities. I would like to conclude with that.
So you've all given me ideas for blogs. I'm gonna write about, easy recipes for Passover that don't use leavened bread. There's not a lot of them. So, I think one of the most common misconceptions that I've faced with is something that I've expressed. And living as a Jewish woman in the South, there's a small community. And I always like to tell this story because I think it speaks to what we've been discussing. It's just accepting others and being in harmony with people. I bought my now husband a painting for our anniversary. This was not a wise move because the painting was too big for my car. And I did not know that until I purchased the painting and took it to put it in my car. My husband was out of town. I didn't know anybody in town. I was just standing in the parking lot with this giant painting, kind of feeling pretty silly, not knowing how I was going to get this home. And this older woman pulled up in a CRV, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, I'm fine." And she's like, "No, are you okay?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm not. I don't know what to do." And she said, "Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm retired. Let me help you get this painting home." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, are you sure?" And, kind of like stranger danger a little bit. But I'm like, I'm taller than she is. I could like take her if I needed to. So she follows me to my home. She unloads the painting for me, and, we have a little chit chat. And then she grabs my hands and she goes, "Well, what church do you go to in town?" Mentally, I thought, oh, here it goes. I'm going to prepare myself. This can go okay, or it can go really, really bad, really fast. And I took a deep breath and I said, "Well, I attend the synagogue over in Columbus, B'nai Israel. I'm Jewish." And she reached for me and I was like, oh, what's about to happen? And I braced myself. And she said, "Jews are blessed people." And I just burst into tears. I said, "Oh my God, I was not expecting you to say that." And I said, "Thank you very much for that." I said, "That's not the reaction I'm used to getting." And she just patted my hand and she said, "You just have a good day." I said, "Well, you too." So I think the misunderstanding was on my part that I was going to experience maybe some negative perspective from saying, "Well, I'm Jewish." And I think there's room to grow on all ends. And kind of like what Rizwan said, is understanding our differences and knowing that there are differences, but that those differences are okay. And that's what makes us, like, I always think of the world as kind of like this really weird patchwork quilt that people are putting together, and we all bring something unique to the table, but it's only when we come together and that we work together that quilt becomes the quilt.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I just want to say thank you all so much for sharing the different perspectives, positions, and backgrounds. And I want to thank y'all for all being here as well. So I want to say specifically to y'all, thank you for being honest and listening with openness and respect. What we experienced today wasn't just about agreement, it was about understanding, it was about community, and understanding is where real community begins. And we also want all of our students to find communities as well. So just want to say thank y'all again so much. And as we wrap up, we're here and available to answer any questions. If y'all have any questions as well, our offices are up on the third floor of the Union, and we can direct you to every single one of these amazing people as well. So just want to say thank y'all, and as always, y'all stay.